بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. So, we will discuss now the chapter on fasting, Sawm. And in fact, as we know, yesterday was Ashura. And in the beginning, before Ramadan became wajib, before Ramadan was prescribed on the Muslims, the day of Ashura was wajib. And this was due to when the Prophet ﷺ went into Medina, he saw the Jews fasting on the 10th of Muharram, and he said, "Nahnu awla bi Musa minhu." We have a closer connection to Sayyidina Musa than them. And so the fasting of the 10th of Muharram became wajib upon the Muslims. And when the fasting of Ramadan then became prescribed, the fasting of Muharram then became recommended, istihbab, and as it's known to be to fast also a day with it, either the 9th day with the 10th or the 10th and the 11th. But if you only fast the 10th, also it's still the sunnah is still achieved. قال المصنف رحمه الله, the author, he says, may Allah have mercy upon him, وأما الصوم وهو الثالث من أركان الإسلام. As-sawm means to withhold, literally. And this is, of course, withholding from anything, whether that be food or perhaps speaking, as mentioned in the Quran. إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا, that I have made an oath to the most merciful to fast. And this was in both the times of Sayyidina Zakaria, and as well as the parents of Sayyidina Maryam. This was a fast from speaking. And Shar'an, in the Shari'i understanding, this is of course withholding from that which breaks the fast from Fajr, Tulu' al-Fajr, till the sunset, with a specific intention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Now, here it mentions that the nations before us had also been given fasting as a method in order to draw closer to Allah. But the nature of their fasting was different, or that they had changed their fasting to make it harder for them. So initially they were given a fast that did not entail completely not eating or drinking and abstaining from intimacy with their spouses, but they had made it harder for themselves. And because of that, the later generations of them, as reported in the narrations, then started to change things to make it easier again. And so while the fasts used to be perhaps in a month where it was in the heat of the summer, now they said, okay, this year let's change it to the winter so that it doesn't have to be so difficult. So these things caused, of course, them to invalidate their version of fasting. And so Islam then renewed the fasting as it should be. And the ayah says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And this is a common theme in the Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَهْتَدُونَ. Perchance, or perhaps you may be of those who have taqwa, those who are guided, or those, etc. In other words, this is a method in order to attain taqwa. But even then, it is not guaranteed that you will simply, by abstaining from food, drink, and intimacy, well, you attain taqwa. Okay? But this is part of the prescription. And that which is also required in order to attain taqwa is something inward. Because taqwa is something that you find within the heart. Like, so as I mentioned that fasting was prescribed in the second year of the Hijrah, in the month before Ramadan, Sha'ban. And so therefore, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam fasted 9 Ramadans, until his passing. And all of the 9 Ramadans that he fasted, except one, and the 8 of them, only lasted for 29 days. As for only one of them, it lasted for 30 days. And we know that when how do we then establish the month of Ramadan? The sunnah is to be able to see the hilal, the new crescent, with the naked eye. That is the sunnah. And therefore, on the 29th day of Sha'ban, just before the month of Ramadan, it is haram for someone to fast. Why? Because it is called the day of doubt, Yawm al-Shak. And so if the skies are cloudy, what should you do? You should just continue Sha'ban as 30 days. And so too for the month of Ramadan, if on the 29th day of Ramadan, one is not able to see the crescent moon. The word Ramadan, it refers to it. Originally, the Arabs named their months based on the phenomenon or the things that they were experiencing. So initially, Ramadan was in the heat of summer. So the word Ramad, it means the heat of summer, and shiddatul harb, heat, intense heat, and the names of the months within obviously later interpreted within Islamic understanding. And they said it's Ramadan is therefore called Ramadan because its heat is to extract through its heat the sins of those who fast. طيب. وهو الثالث من أركان الإسلام. It's the third pillar of Islam. Okay. The pillars of Islam, as we mentioned, is in the famous hadith. There's 2 hadiths about Hadith Jibreel, or the other hadith, the third hadith that Imam al-Nawawi mentions in the Arba'in. بني الإسلام على 5. Islam is built upon 5. And fasting, in some narrations it's not mentioned third, but in some narrations mentioned third. Some narrations puts it as 4th, some puts it as 5th. Nonetheless, in terms of the sequencing of the books of fiqh, usually fasting is mentioned third. فهو إمساك معروف على وجه مخصوص. Someone asks you, what is fasting? Fasting is it's a known withholding from food, drink, and intimacy with intention in a specific manner. Okay, and in reality, the pillars of fasting, that which if you do not have it within the fasting, your fasting does not count. There are only 2. The first one is the intention, the niyyah. And the second one itself is the fast, this withholding from the that which breaks the fast. Now, when it comes to the Shafi'i madhab, the Shafi'i school of thought that we're studying, the niyyah, the definition of a niyyah is to do an action or to intend to do an action while that intention is connected to the first part of that action. قصد الفعل مقترن بفعله. And so therefore, if you're actually doing the niyyah for salah, for example, what do? When you say Allahu Akbar, that's when you're making the intention in your heart. And if you were to say the intention before doing takbir in salah, that's not called intention. It's not called the niyyah. It's called the azm, the resolve to do something. But the niyyah itself has to be connected to the action. As for fasting, this is the only exception. Why? Because one must make the intention or the resolve to fast the coming day in the month of Ramadan for every single day, and that intention must take place the night before. So as soon as Maghrib ends for the previous day, from that time till the Fajr, one must make the intention. The intention should be in one's heart. If you say it out loud, it's going to be a sunnah, yes. But simply you need to intend that I'm going to fast tomorrow for Ramadan. And that's it. Now, if one does not say the intention out loud, or if one doesn't even really think about it, but one is coming for suhoor in the morning, before Fajr, why would you come to have a meal before Fajr except if you're going to fast? So it's as if that is going to bring to mind and remind you that you're about to fast. And so, yes, it doesn't negate making the intention. You come to eat suhoor, but it is an indication that the person is intending to fast. Okay, so therefore one must bring to mind the intention every night. وَتَبْيِيتُهَا مِنَ اللَّيْلِ, and to bring it to intention from the night. Now, what occurs at sometimes is that some people genuinely forget to make the intention. Okay, perhaps they even oversleep for suhoor, so they did not make the intention at all. In this occurrence, it is therefore recommended for us to, in the beginning of the month, the very beginning of the month, to make the intention that we will be fasting the entirety of the month. And this is in line with the madhab of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, who requires the intention for the entirety of the month. And so working with both schools of thought, one is now protected when one forgets to make the intention. But you must be careful. Why? Because if you do this, you must also know that there are some consequences related to this. Based on the Shafi'i madhab, if you make the intention as a Shafi'i, you're going to be fasting as a Shafi'i, right? As a Muslim, but who follows the particular ahkam, rulings that are extracted within the school of thought that are accepted, that is the Shafi'i madhab. And if you were to accidentally eat something during the day while you are fasting, out of forgetfulness, you are excused. And the Prophet Muhammad said, Allah is the one who fed that person. Right. Whereas for Imam Malik, if you forget the intention and you base your fast on the madhab of Imam Malik, he does not excuse the person if he accidentally eats. Rather, he interprets the hadith to mean that fast which is a recommended fast, not the fast of Ramadan. Okay? And so, therefore, if you forget to make the intention and you then eat, now you're doing two things against the norm. Your fast is then broken completely, and you have to repeat it after the month of Ramadan, one day. Does that mean now you can eat for the rest of the day. No, you have to. It is wajib on both schools of thought, in all of them, in fact, that you must abstain from eating and drinking and intimacy until sunset, even if you're not fasting. Okay, even if you're not fasting. Okay. As for those people who are excused from fasting from the get-go, such as women on the menstruation, or someone who is very sick, or someone who is very old and unable to fast, or someone perhaps on travel, or a pregnant woman who fears for herself and the baby, and that's recommended. Therefore, for most times for pregnant women, she should not fast, especially in the beginning, pregnancy, etc. But this also goes back to the doctors, and generally it's something that it's not recommended for pregnant women to fast, whatever the circumstances may be, whether she be super healthy or not. But for these people who are excused from the get-go, they are allowed to eat during the month of Ramadan. They don't have to abstain because they're not fasting. So that's the first intention. The intention is the first rukun. And as for the second one, it is going to be al-imsak an al-muftirat or al-mufattirat, to withhold from that which breaks the fast. Min al-ta'ami wa sharab, from food and drink. And this is, of course, what they mean by this is that one intentionally puts some form of sustenance, something which has some sort of nourishment in a part of the body which can lead to the stomach. Okay, so that you can actually get sustenance or nourishment from that particular food item or drink, as well as if it can lead to the mind, to the brain. Okay, so also a cavity in the brain that can also affect. And this is just what I'm teaching you here is based on the predominant positions. Now there are fatwa and other weaker positions that would allow you to do certain acts during the day that perhaps it does go to the brain or around the brain, but it doesn't break the fast. And there are certain injections, etc., that one can then take during the fast. Yeah. And in terms of food and drink, it's not. There's no difference between a little food and a little drink. Even a small sesame seed can break the fast, or a drop of water. Intentionally, however, it has to be intentional. Okay. Well, jima', and of course, the intimacy between husband. But when it comes to if one actually does break their fast through these things, intentionally, it's a grave sin. But one, in terms of food and drink, one simply has to repeat that day after a moment. As for intimacy, there is a penalty upon the man, not upon the woman. Okay. And that is, of course, to fast 60 days. And if he does not do so, he can't do so. If it's difficult, with the option to not do that, he has to feed 60 poor people. Okay. And that's, of course, after the fact that you can't free a slave. That's the first thing that one should do. But if you can't do that, then to fast, and if you can't do that, then to feed 60. والاستمناء بمباشرة, okay, and to have some sort of what is called if there's a release of some sort of sperm due to a direct touch between spouses, such as if you kiss your spouse and you know that that will cause there to be a form of ejaculation, then or of course masturbation. These all things, these are haram and they lead to breaking the fast as well. Yeah, so that's important. But if one were to be sleeping and have a dream or whatever and wake up like that, fast continues as per normal. Or if one has thoughts and the thoughts lead to the release of sperm, then that will also not have an effect. But it's not recommended to do so. Again, this is just the bare minimum. The fast of the believer should be, it's equally as important for you to abstain from, things which will, break the fast in terms of the reward, such as lying and speaking with foul language, etc. All of these things reduce the reward of the fast or eliminate it. Okay. Yeah. The thing about jima', thing about intimacy or sexual intercourse, that's of course breaks the fast, even if no ejaculation occurs. Right, so that breaks the fast. والاستقاءة بالاختيار, that if one vomits during the fast, then that does not break the fast. But if one forces oneself to vomit, to throw up, that breaks the fast immediately. Let alone if one puts a finger inside the throat, that breaks the fast immediately, right? But if one forces oneself to vomit, and one actually vomits, then that breaks the fast as well. Okay. Now, all of these things are that which breaks the fast. But when it comes to how do I say, someone who's new to Islam, they are generally excused from these acts if they were to do it without knowledge, and they're allowed a certain time period then to have this in order to learn the religion. Okay. Another thing that I forgot to mention now about al-istimna' bi mubasharatin, that if there were to be a touching between spouses, and ejaculation occurred, or whatever it's called, then but without any, I'm sorry, with a barrier between spouses, right? And there was even the private was covered as well. Technically, that would not break the fast, but it's a very difficult specific scenario for it to occur. And again, if it's accidental, it's not intentional. If it's intentional, then it breaks the fast. Okay. Then he says, وَمِن تَمَامِ الصَّوْمِ, and from the completeness of fasting. كف الجوارح عما يكرهه الله تعالى من الأعضاء السبعة الآتية. That one must, from the completeness of fasting, is to abstain from doing that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes, disapproves of, from the sins of the 7 limbs, which we will be talking about in the last chapter of the book. And in the hadith it says, خمس يفطرن الصائم الكذب والغيبة والنميمة واليمين الكاذب والنظر بالشهوة. 5 things break the fast of the believer. Now these things, again, it doesn't mean that it literally breaks the fast. It removes from the completeness of the fast lying, gossip, again, let's say, also lying about someone, or gossiping, but in a way that is making up things, lying, and causing, fitna in the community. وَالْيَمِينُ الْكَاذِبَةُ, false oath, and of course, looking at things with desire, with lust. وَمِن تَمَامِ الصَّوْمِ as well is to ensure تحري الإفطار على حلال, is to ensure that one breaks the fast then at the end of the day on something which is halal, and not to eat too much. وعدم الاستكثار من الأكل. Now, what is the sunnah? The sunnah is to break the fast with a date that is soft. That's called rutab. And if one does not find that, then to break it with a normal date, tamar. And if one does not find a normal date, then to break it with something which is sweet, like a fruit that is not baked or made on the fire. And if one does not find that, then to use some sweet item. And only after that do they say to drink. So I see a lot of people, when they break their fast, there's dates in front of them, rutab, but they start with the water. That's not the sunnah, because of the dates is there. So dates are there, so you should use that first, and then you can drink of the water. Okay. And also when it comes to, especially when people are invited to or iftar at someone's home, it is and let's say you're late you're about to get to the person's house, but or you're on the road, and you are, well, let me say this first. For suhoor, it is recommended then to delay it, right? But one cannot delay it to the point where the adhan actually starts, because that means that Fajr is entered and now you're eating, which means that you're not going to be fasting because you've eaten during the day. So before the time for the adhan, you should definitely stop before that, at least like 5 minutes or so. And some people recommend longer, but it's not necessary to follow that, like to stop 15 minutes before. That's not part of our deen, it's just for caution. And when it comes to breaking the fast, also one must not break the fast before the time of Maghrib, but one must know for certain Maghrib is entered and then immediately to break the fast and not to delay. And so that's the recommendation. But the greater recommendation is to honor the invitation of someone who invites you for iftar. Why do they invite you for iftar? They invite you so that they can get the reward for giving you food to break your fast with. So if you're on the road and the adhan goes off and you break your fast on your own, and now you go there to eat iftar, that's actually, number one, you're not honoring the invitation. Number two, you're breaking a person's heart as well, because they invited you to get the reward. So these matters one should be aware of in order for one to gain maximum reward for fast. وينبغي الاستكثار من الصوم. And fasting is generally recommended to do much of, okay? Because it really affects the person's ability to stay focused on the goal. لا سيما الأيام الفاضلة في الشرع, right? Especially the days such as the 3 white days in the middle of the month, 13th, 14th, 15th, Mondays and Thursdays. And obviously these Ashura and some of these days that we know of, Arafah if you're not on Hajj, etc. As for the person who is engaged in seeking knowledge, Shara'i knowledge, this is something that someone, if it's going to affect you, it is better for you to not fast a lot, except the fara'id, and maybe a few of the sunnah. And if you are someone who is, you are constantly learning, and it is actually better than for you. Your seeking of knowledge is greater in reward than the fast. And it's even greater than standing up in the middle of the night to pray, but to rather stand up in the middle of the night to be awake if you are able to function in the day, and to be studying intensively, but with doing a minimum of ibadah at night as well. Wallahu a'lam wa billahi tawfiq. That's the bab of fasting. Are there any questions about fasting? There's many like contemporary questions that people have, like, are you allowed to take an injection, etc., like that? And these things are generally okay. These things are generally okay to do, not only because the way that it's taken does not lead to perhaps the stomach, but also there's always a wajh and an opinion in our tradition that allows it. Okay, but if you have any specific questions, then inshallah you can ask here or ask in the group. So now we go to الزكاة. الزكاة, باب الزكاة. الزكاة is, of course, معنى النمو والتطهير. So الزكاة لغة is to increase and purification. That's why tazkiyah, purification of the heart, tazkiyah al-nafs, tazkiyah al-qalb, is the literal meaning of the word zakah, which is a tathir, to purify oneself. So zakah purifies the heart, and tazkiyah purifies zakah purifies both the money and the heart. وهي رابع أركان الإسلام فتجب على المسلم معرفة أنواع الأموال الواجبة فيها. Okay, now it's part of the arkan of Islam. Okay, now when it comes to Islam, the shahada, of course, is what makes a person Muslim. When you say ashhadu an, I believe in Allah, I testify that there's no one worthy of worship except Allah, and that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his messenger. This enters you into Islam. But once you're a Muslim, for the first 6 months, you have the responsibility to learn that which you are incumbent upon knowing as a Muslim. And if you're also someone who grew up away from ulama, then you're also excused for most of your life, right? Until you have the opportunity to learn. Okay. But what generally happens for people, especially when they convert, after the first 6 months, they're no longer excused from that which is the most fundamental aspects of the faith, which is known by necessity. And these include the 5 pillars of Islam. If you ask a Muslim, how many salahs are there in a day, and they say 10, like some of these people said, then clearly, like, there's something missing. Now, this is different from a community that has been taught otherwise. So, like there's certain communities that they found in Yemen that they thought there's only two prayers a day, and they've been doing that for hundreds of years. They thought there was only two prayers in a day. So, these are different scenarios. But generally, to know that zakah is from the arkan of Islam, and then someone who denies that zakah is from the arkan of Islam or salah is wajib, these people, they are outside of the fold of Islam from the perspective of the deen, okay, and from the perspective of knowledge. You don't say that they are disbelievers, because that's not your right to individually say that someone's not a Muslim. But that understanding is definitely kufr. It's outside of the fold of Islam. And if there's an imam, a khalifa, they would obviously make that judgment. And if they were to continue that, then they would be fought. Just as Sayyidina Abu Bakr fought in the Ridda wars when people had refused to pay the zakah, okay, after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What are the things, the money that, or the things that one possesses that one should pay zakah on? The first is cattle. Okay, cattle refers to, of course, sheep, goats, these things, camels, and cows. Na'am, it's called a na'am. Okay. And a na'am. Okay, an-na'am, these are specifically the ones that are free ranging. In other words, they have free roaming. They can roam wherever they want. They can eat of whatever they want. You don't really take care of their food. They belong to you, but they're basically in an open space. As for cattle that is on your farm and you take care of what they eat and what they drink, stuff like that, there's no zakah. Okay, but no zakah from the perspectives that they are cattle. As for if you get business from, if it's a business, it's your business, you will pay zakah for the money that you get from them. Okay, so that's different. Okay. The second thing that you pay zakah on is is gold and silver. If you have gold, silver that is in your possession, then you pay zakah on it. Okay, and by extension, the money, paper money that we have, although not everyone takes that position, but the majority of the position has just said that paper money is included in the zakah. It's a minority position that excludes paper money from both the zakah and riba, usually, but it does exist today. There was paper money back in the time of the Prophet as well, but it was different to how we understand it, so because of that, there's a connection between our paper money and that, but it's not the same. In terms of gold and silver, again, only that which you use as for transactions, and the gold that you have in your possession that you are not using and stored away, so that you can, basically as a saving. You also, of course, pay zakah. As for jewelry, for women, that's not paid. Zakah is not paid on that. Specifically, that as it relates to our school. And her usage of the jewelry within the year, or it has to be like thrice She can't just use it once or like all the time. All the time, of course, no problem. But they must be generally she's using the gold or the silver as jewelry. So there's no zakah paid on that. Some say just once you have to use it once, but generally it's more than once. Yeah. What tijara? Tijara here refers to the stock that you have left over. Okay, the stock that you have left over. So that's what I was saying. If you have cattle and you using it as a business, that will be included in the stock that you have left over at the end of the year. So then, for you to calculate the percentage of that to be paid as zakah. Warikaz. This refers to, of course, the treasures of that which was hidden pre-Islam, and if you were to uncover it today, that you would then pay zakah on it, because you'd be getting the value of it, you'd be getting most of it, but part of it you'd be paid. Valuable. No, as I mentioned, if the cattle is free ranging and you use it for business, yes, then now it's two. But if it's not free ranging and you only use it for business, then just one. If you neither use it for business if you just use it for personal use, then but it's your farm and stuff like that, then there's no zakah on it. And then al-ma'ni, and that is, of course, extracted gold and silver and other, well, specifically that from the earth. So not the gold and silver that you own for as a currency, but rather just gold and silver that you have extracted from the earth, separate category. Right. And then the last one is al-mu'asharat, and this is specifically only two things referring to al-hubub and thimar. And the hubub then is going to be like rice, these things. And thimar is obviously only dates and grapes, nothing else. No other thimar. Okay. So these are the categories. And he says that it is a condition for one to pay zakah on some of these things, not all of them, that a full year must pass. Okay. And during that full year, one must have the nisab. The nisab being a minimum amount of that particular item, in which then it is incumbent upon you to pay zakah. What does that mean? If you, for example, for gold and silver, I don't know exactly in your country, but generally, let's say like as an example, for one to pay zakah in dollars, let's say dollars, one must have untouched for a full year in one's bank or account or savings, whatever, about, let's say, $500, okay, just sitting there. I'm not sure exactly the amount in your country, but this is obviously calculated from the gold and silver. If one were to then drop down underneath the 500 at any point during that year, zakah is no longer incumbent upon that person. And then there are loopholes as well. If one has the nisab and just before it's due, you give it to your wife. Now it's not in your possession anymore. Again, you don't have to pay zakah. But that type of loophole is blameworthy and is punishable on their judgment, even if you were to get away from a particular thing in this dunya. The difference between what they call hukum qada and hukum diyana. Hukum qada is the horizontal judgment that takes place in the Sharia in this world, based on the fiqh, the understanding of the Sharia. And the hukum diyana is the true Sharia as it will be, how do I say, executed on the day of judgment, that everything that you try to get away with will be accounted for on the day of judgment. طيب. ويشترط الحول لها وكذلك يشترط للنقود والتجارة. So for cattle, for currency, for money, and for business, you must have these things for a year. As for the others, no. For rikaz, for ma'adin, for ma'asharat, there's no hawl. There's no year. As soon as you find the rikaz, these hidden treasures, you have to pay zakah. As soon as you get the gold extracted from the earth, you have to pay it. As soon as the hubub and the thimar they ripened and they're in season, and you take it off the trees or wherever you get it, then you have to pay the zakah. Okay. And also in these three, meaning na'am, tijara, and food, there must also be the minimum amount. What do you pay for the zakah? What do you pay for zakah? If you do have the minimum amount, the nisab, right? What do you then pay in terms of the zakah? And by the way, for the nisab, for the cattle and for your currency, gold and silver, you must have that the full year. As for tijara, it doesn't have to be the full year. It's only by way of the end of the year. So you have to say this is the beginning of the year, that's the end of the year. At the end of the year, if you have the nisab, then you have to pay zakah on that. So for the tijara, it's different. Of course, you can go underneath, you don't have so much stock, but if you still left over end of the year with this amount of stock, then you have to pay zakah on it. Okay. Precisely. When you the end of the year, last paid it, then another year, right? But if the first time you ever pay it, you have to start from a particular year, and perhaps when you started the business or something like that. Okay, so he says here that what is incumbent then for you to pay for gold and silver, or for your money, in other words, and for business is rubu al-ushr, right? Rubu al-ushr is 2.5%. Ruba is a quarter of al-ushr of 10%. So a quarter of 10% is 2.5%. Okay. when it comes to that's the wajib for what for money, gold and silver, and for business. As for rikaz, as for those treasures that one finds, that's 5%. No, not 5%. Sorry. What is it? 20, 40, 60. It's 20%. Yeah, 20%. So 20% of it, khums, not khums في المئة, khums. 20%, a fifth of it, of its value, one gives away because you're just stumbling upon it. You find it, or you know where it is, and this is not didn't belong to you initially, but you've taken it. And also, you have to ensure that it's something that was there before Islam. So it's from maybe a lot of Egyptian archaeologists will find these artifacts and will be worth millions. And if they are Muslim and they actually follow what they're supposed to do, they should be giving 20% away. And even the government, is responsible for these things, and they should be giving 20% as zakat immediately, not waiting after for a year or whatever. Okay. And for the gold and silver that you extract from the earth, though, if someone finds gold and silver in the earth, that's also 2.5%, just like the naqdain, just like the gold and silver of what we have. Okay. Yeah. As for hubub, like seeds and fruits, dates and grapes, there's a difference. Did you water the crop by yourself or not? If you had to water it because the climate that you're living in is dry and not much rain, then you only pay 5% when you harvest the crop. As for if it was raining most of the time, such as in certain countries like the UK, or you guys, it rains a lot in New Zealand, right? So such as in New Zealand, no, you pay 10%. You don't pay 5%. You pay 10% of the value of the crop. And just take note that this is very specific things that we're talking about here. In terms of thimar, it's only dates and grapes.
Is there a barrier with that around how much should be of watering should take place by yourself? Like, is it all or nothing? Because I guess in New Zealand, most farming is done by rain-fed, but with, say, quite a bit of like irrigation as well.
Do you pay for do you pay a water bill at the end of every month?
Yes, in most places you would, yes.
And that water, does it come from the government, which comes from rivers or springs or something?
Yeah, from rivers, but it's not necessarily owned by the government. I don't think I can't remember exactly how that works.
Yeah. So in that sense, you'd still pay the 10%, even if it comes from the government. The difference here is if you have a spring in your backyard using your own water, then you'll only be paying 5%.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's not from your tap. Your tap is still from the rain water.
All right. That might be something for me to look into water planning
Yeah.
legislations with then.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not only rainwater. They mention as well like river water, springs that belong to other people, etc. Like that. Or natural springs. I'm talking about if you have your own well and you use that. So that's different. Like we have borehole water as well in South Africa. So if you have a borehole in your backyard, then that's definitely from your own water. Okay. Then Zakat al-Fitr. This is of course Zakat al-Fitr wajiba ala kulli Muslimin. So the for Zakat that we were speaking about before, this is of course not wajib upon every Muslim. It's only wajib upon the Muslim who has the nisab. But for Zakat al-Fitr, it's wajib upon every Muslim. Okay. The only difference here is that if a person is responsible for other people, then he pays on behalf of those people he's responsible for. Okay, he or she. Right. So, like a single mother, she has to pay the zakah for her and her kids if she has no support. But if there's a husband, then he has to pay for all of them. For example. And the minimum of the zakat al-fitr is that one must have enough food and stuff for the day of Eid and the night of Eid. Okay? And the night of Eid is some consider it the night before Eid, some consider it the night of the day of Eid, after Eid. And so that's why you'll find even those who take zakah should pay zakat al-fitr. And so you might have enough for the day. Someone who's poor and they give zakah and they also receive zakat al-fitr at the same time. So they basically it's just like a cycle. Okay, and it is you can pay by ghalib qut al-balad, by the what is mostly used among the people. And yeah, it's to do with the Muslims. Okay, so not like in South Africa, we have a difference between what the most South Africans use, which is like wheat, yeah. Whereas the Muslims, most of the Muslims, they will use like rice, for example. So what is the wajib? Then it's rice. Okay. Although both is allowed either way. And also you're allowed to do it through value of it in money. Okay. Although that's a big difference of opinion, but in the Hanafi madhab that's allowed without doubt. And in the Shafi'i it's a weaker position. And of course one must make the niyyah when giving zakat al-fitr in your mind that you don't have to tell the person, you can just give them, but in your mind you know this is the zakat al-fitr. And again, the bare minimum of it is mentions arba'atu amdad, 4 muds. So that's very little. Like I think and it's depending on the land. In America, it will be much more. Like in Egypt, last Eid al-Fitr, it was like 50 Janae, like less than $1 basically for zakat al-Fitr. But yeah, so the more you pay, the more you give, the more reward you get for it as well. Would you pay zakatu? This is, of course, the ayah, the famous ayah that mentions the 8 recipients of zakat. ولا يجوز أن يصرف الزكاة والفطر إلا إلى حر مسلم. Again, zakah is different to sadaqah. Sadaqah is charity. And this is you're allowed to give this to anyone you want. As for zakah, you only give it to a Muslim. Okay. There's one exception of it, and we'll speak about this now. But zakah and zakat al-fitr is only given to a free Muslim. Is one of the following 8 categories. Either he is faqir, okay, or he's miskin. Okay, faqir and miskin, they both mean poor. Okay, but a faqir and a miskin is more poor than a faqir. So, for example, if one needs, let's say, $10 for the day, to survive. The faqir, both the faqir and the miskin will have less than 10. But the faqir might have $7 and the miskin will have like $2. So the miskin is more in need of the zakat. But whenever they are mentioned together in the Quran or in the Hadith, then they are separate, they differ. But whenever you mention faqir only, then you include in that miskin. If you only mention miskin, just like Iman and Islam. Whenever we say Islam on its own, we include Iman. Whenever we say Iman, we mean Islam as well. But if we say them together, we're now talking about two separate things. Islam and Iman. As Iman being a different level of Islam. So faqir, miskin. Number 3 is someone who works. What do I say? Who works for. So وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا. Those who work to collect the zakah and distribute zakah. Okay. So most likely, this was a position that was taken up by certain people. Not if it's government appointed or the imam says you should do it, we're going to give you money. Now that's a job and they get paid for it. But if someone takes it upon themselves, trustworthy person, the community approves of it as well, but he does it on his own, and he also through that fard kifaya, because it's a fard kifaya, someone must do it in the community to distribute the wealth. They are also recipients as well. And most likely they will also be faqir, they will also be miskin. But usually, even if they're not, but that's the only thing that they do. Okay, generally, they can also take their portion. And again, they don't take it for themselves; they are given it. So if someone is known to be someone who distributes in the community, they're not going to distribute the zakah and give it to themselves. Rather, they'll distribute to others, and someone will give them zakah as well. So this is for you. Then is the fourth one mentioned in the ayahs, وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةُ قُلُوبُهُمْ. So these are those who are not yet Muslim. This is how it used to be. Those who are not yet Muslim, but giving them wealth will bring them closer to Islam. We make them accept Islam. So this is what was practiced in the time of the Prophet. Sayyidina Umar, he stopped that. In fact, even though it's a clear ayah, that doesn't mean that the ayah now means it's no longer practiced. No, it can still be practiced today. But in his time, he found that the Muslims were so strong that they didn't need to give people money in order to them to enter Islam. So the practice of it was no longer given. Now this falls into a different question, which is when one gives zakah, is it obligatory for you to give zakah to all 8 categories or to one of the 8 categories? And we'll talk about that in a moment. But so that's number 4. Some say that mu'allafat qulubuhum, to bring close their hearts, are those new Muslims. And this is what's practiced today. So converts who even if they're not necessarily poor, they can get zakah in the first, initial period, first year or two. Give them money, and zakah, that's definitely to bring them closer to the community. Right. وَفِي الرِّقَابِ, and of course those who are slaves who want to buy their freedom. Number 5. Number 6, وَالْغَارِمِينَ. Gharimin are those who are overwhelmed with debt. Okay, so people who are in debt, you can give them zakah. And it's a big stigma that people have in the communities of people who are in debt. That that's their fault. They put themselves in debt with so much money. But then no one wants to give them zakah because they don't deserve it. No. Who says that that's the case, or who says that that's how you should be treating these people? That argument can be made for every one of these scenarios, or most of them. طيب. وفي سبيل الله وفي سبيل الله, and this year now is referring to both primarily those who are in jihad, on jihad, to give them money in order for them to spend that money while they're on jihad fi sabilillah. And by way of, by extension, also the student of knowledge. The student of knowledge who is learning to preserve the deen himself and in the community, and to ward off the false arguments of the disbelievers. He is also, how do I say, open. But this is very problematic because this student shouldn't be, it's difficult to say today, but a lot of the people studying deen, they actually don't fall under this category. It's really someone who's seen as a bright future, not in terms of like fame, but in terms of actual work. So his teachers see that he's hardworking, he's very smart, he's able to actually be a serious student of knowledge. Not someone who's spending even, like, let's say you study for 4 hours a day. That's not a talib al-ilm. You have to be studying for at least half of your day to be considered a talib al-ilm. So like someone who's studying for 10, 12 hours a day minimum, or you're reading, you're analyzing, you're reviewing, preparing for class, that's bare minimum. And there are other definitions of who the talib al-ilm are. And then the last one is wabn as-sabil, and the one who is lost, who is in a foreign land, and perhaps he has money, but he doesn't have money available for him at the moment. He's able to take zakat. Even if he says, okay, I'll give it to you back when I get back to my land, I'll send it to you, whatever. Yes, he can still pay, he can still get zakat. So these are the 8 categories, and like I said, generally they say that you must, the mu'tamad, the strongest position is that you must give each one of these 8 categories equally when you give your zakat. So if you have $8, each one must get $1. Like zakat, like let's say $8. Okay, $8 wouldn't be generally the nisab, but let's say $80. You give each one 10. But it's very difficult to find them. So then what is done is that you give it to the imam, the head of the community, or the head of he distributes it, or if there's a organization. And then also, but they say the minimum is at least 3. Find 3 of these categories, do it. And then there's the opinion that just one of these categories suffice. And that's what's practiced today. Okay, so zakah is one thing. And this is important. This is وَكَوْنِهِ غَيْرَ هَاشِمِيٍّ وَلَا مُطَّلِبِيٍّ وَلَا مَوْلًا لَهُمَا. That the Hashimis, who are the family of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ from Banu Hashim. Who is Banu Hashim? He is, of course, Hashim is the great-grandfather of the Prophet, the father of Abdul Muttalib. So his descendants, they do not get zakah. As well as Hashim's brother, Muttalib, his descendants, that Imam al-Shafi'i is a descendant of. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, Banu Muttalib wa Banu Hashim shay'un wahid, we are one. And when the sanctions occurred for 3 years during when they were in Mecca, those family of the Prophet ﷺ were Muslim and non-Muslim from Banu Muttalib also joined them being sanctioned. As we know that Hashim and Muttalib, they were brothers. father and uncle of Abdul Muttalib. But they were not the only sons of Abdul Manaf. Abdul Manaf had 4 sons. Okay, he also had Abdul Shams, one of his sons, and forgot the other name now, the others. They were asked, and some of the Sahaba are in fact descendants of them, and they asked the Prophet, why is it that you treat, why are we not entered into a particular ayah that is mentioned? We interpreted to be that the Banu Muttalib also they get a certain share of some of the wealth. And so he explained that they are shay'un wahid, we are one, and that they supported us when we were ostracized within the community. So why don't they get zakah? Because they get a fifth of the spoils of war. Okay, they get a fifth of the spoils of war, 20% of the spoils of war. And included in them are those free slaves that they have. Now, the argument today is that does not exist, and so therefore they can get in our day. Some ulama, they still practice that, no, they can't get, and some of them say no, because spoils of war does not exist today, that they do not, that they can get zakah. And then he says, وَيَجِبُ إِسْتِعَابُ الْمَوْجُودِينَ مِنْهُمْ. As I mentioned, it is obligatory for you to, as long as you can find these 8 categories, you give all of them, but if you can't, then you give it to someone who can, or you at least find 1 or 3 categories to give to. So that's the section on the zakah. Right. Are there any questions about zakah? طيب. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Al-Hajj. Al-Hajj means qasd. Qasd ila mu'azzam. To intend to do something, to do something great. And in the Sharia, it is qasd الذهاب إلى بيت الله الحرام وما حوله. To intend to go to the haram of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Mecca and to do its rights that's around it. Okay. لأداء النسك. And so that's why in the Salat Dua al-Istiftah in the Salah, what do we say? إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا مسلما وما أنا من المشركين إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي. Yeah, when we say that dua in Salah, yeah, the nusuk, yeah, both refers to this and it refers to all of your events or actions that you do in your life. ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين. Okay, indeed, my Salah and all my activities, Hajj and otherwise, my life and my death is all for the sake of God. The Hajj is also fard upon every Muslim, but with conditions that this Muslim is a free Muslim and he is, of course, someone who is baligh, he is pubescent, etc., and that they have the ability to do so. Now, it is obligatory upon them if they have the ability to do so. But if they don't have the ability to do so, it's not obligatory upon them, but it still is valid and it equals the obligatory Hajj. So if someone goes to Hajj and they are sick, yes, they still get the reward for the obligatory Hajj, but it was not really obligatory upon them. Okay, so in other words, they have the option. But if, and also if a child goes for Hajj, right, he gets the reward for it. But the obligation of the Hajj does not fall away from him once he becomes a mukallaf, once he becomes pubescent and accountable. The same thing for a slave, as it were back in the day. if they went on Hajj, it would not fall away from them until they did the Hajj and they were free. Okay. So as we mentioned, وَكَذَا الْعُمْرَةُ فِي الْعُمْرِ مَرَّةً. And Umrah is therefore also wajib upon a person in their lifespan at least once. So these days we do, most people when they go for Hajj, they do Umrah as well. And they call it Al-Hajj bit-Tamattu'. Al-Hajj bit-Tamattu', which is one type of Hajj. Which is what you do is that you go to Mecca and you perform Umrah first with Ihram. Then you get out of Ihram. And when the days of Hajj come, you just put Ihram on again and you do start with the Hajj. Okay. As for Hajj Qiran, there's no taking off the Ihram, putting it back on. It's one Ihram for both Hajj and Umrah. Okay. So it says بِشَرْطِ الْإِسْتِطَاعَةِ. Now the ability to do so, this is referring to the financial ability, okay, as well as the physical ability, as well as that the road to Hajj is safe to travel. And that is why Sayyidina Umar, in his time, they say no one he banned people from going on boats or on ships. So no one actually traveled by ship during his time, because back then it was dangerous because their boats were not very valid. So they had not those who needed to travel by ship for the Hajj was not obligatory upon them, because the road for Hajj was dangerous for them. Okay, there were very few exceptions of people going on ships during his time. As for the time Sayyidina Uthman, he allowed it. Right? وهي أن يملك ما يحتاج إليه في سفره إلى الحج ذهابا وإيابا. Part of istita'a, the ability to do Hajj, is that you possess that which you need in your travel to Hajj, going and coming back. وَنَفَقَةَ مَنْ تَلْزَمُهُ نَفَقَتُهُ إِلَى رُجُوعِهِ. And the sustenance and financial ability to maintain all those you have to maintain till you come back. Okay, so those you leave at home and those who are on the journey with you, if there's anyone with you. And this includes even your animals, even the cat that you leave at home. So you have to make sure there's enough money for the cat. Okay, and not just the money, you must make arrangements. Is the cat going to get enough food? Is the cat going to get the water? Stuff like that. That's not only for Hajj, that's for any time you leave the house and you leave your cat at home. I have a cat, I have two cats, so that's what I'm saying. I always have to make sure the cat has enough things. Although I think cats probably, they don't really know what's going on, so they don't really appreciate it. Okay. طيب. وأعمال الحج ثلاثة أشياء. Now is the time where we as Shafi'is, we separate between what is a fard and what is wajib. Generally, when you say something is obligatory, we say it's called fard or wajib. They're synonyms. But in the bab of Hajj, in the chapter of Hajj, we say no. A fard is one thing and a wajib is something else. Okay. Now, the fard is also called a rukn, because a rukn is something which is necessary for that thing to exist. So too is a fard. If you leave out a rukn or you leave out a fard, it's the same thing. These are now synonyms. Then your entire Hajj is not valid. Okay? And the most important thing of that is al-wuquf bi Arafah, to stand on the plain of Arafah on the day of Arafah, on the 9th, or the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, which is of course in Mecca. Right. As for the wajibat, these are things that if you left them out, you will have to pay a dam. You will have to slaughter an animal for the poor people of Mecca in order for you to then do kathara, to kind of emancipation of that particular, of that particular leaving out of that particular action. And then you have sunan as well, that which is a recommended act. Now, here is where things become very interesting, because if you leave out a wajib, you have to do the dam, okay? But sometimes the wajibat in our madhab is actually considered sunnah or sunan in a different madhab. So which means that you can really practice it and make it easy for yourself as well. Okay. So first of all, what are the fundamental aspects of the Hajj, arkan of the Hajj? They are 5. Number 1, al-ihram. And the ihram is, of course, the niyyah. It's not the physical clothes that you wear. Yes, that is ihram as well. But what is the most important aspect of it? It is the niyyah. But what happens if you make the niyyah, sure, before we're doing the Hajj, but you don't put the actual ihram on? No, you have to do the niyyah again. You have to repeat it, because now you've left out a fundamental aspect of the Hajj. Now, يسألونك عن الأهلة قل هي مواقيت للناس والحج. Allah says in the Quran that they ask about the ahillah. They ask about the new moon, and say these are mawaqit. These are time stamps, time places for people and for the Hajj. So that means that the Hajj therefore has a time period. But the Hajj, the time of Hajj is not only these in the 10 days of the Hajj, within the 14 days of the Hajj. No, it starts already from Shawwal up until the end of the Hajj. In other words, one is allowed to go into ihram from Shawwal, or any time before the day of Arafah. Okay. So that's in terms of the time. These are the months of Hajj. As for the places of Hajj, this is also important. Of course, there are things that you're going to do on the Hajj, but ihram has mawaqit. These are stamps or places, both related to time, as we just mentioned, the months, but also related to places. In other words, you cannot put the ihram on after you have entered into this place. In other words, once you are at this place, you must put it on. Yes, you can put it on before, you can make the intention before. So if you're traveling from Egypt, for example, for Hajj, there's many different places that there's Dhul Hulayfa, there's Yalamlam, in different parts of the world. There's that Irq from Iraq side. There's Juhfa, which is the side that the Egyptians go through, Medina, and etc. These are called the mawaqit, that you can't go past unless you are in ihram, the state of ihram, spiritually and physically. Okay. But if you're coming from Australia, New Zealand, sorry about that mistake, you're not going to wear ihram from New Zealand. It's going to take you, how long will it take you to get to Mecca? Like 2 days, right? Maybe, like, with all the flights, you have to wait at the airport. At least 2 days.
It's about 24 hours odd, because it's 12 hours till Malaysia, then another roughly 12 hours to Jeddah.
No, I'm saying that's just the flights. I'm talking about like the airport in Malaysia, maybe like 3 hours, 2 hours. And then Jeddah as well is not Mecca, so so it's quite long. So generally you don't put the ihram on then. But people then have said Jeddah is a miqat. You can put it from Jeddah, right? As an example, yeah. So therefore, that's the situation when it comes to the ihram. And it is recommended for you to say the niyyah out loud. نويت الحج ونويت العمرة وأحرمت به لله تعالى. And I put on the ihram for the sake of Allah. Okay. Now this is where it becomes dangerous. What is ihram? Ihram means to be placed into a sacred space. Okay. But ihram also means ahrama yuhrimu, meaning to make haram that which was halal before. Because now when you're in the state of ihram, in the months of Hajj, you're not allowed to do certain things that you were allowed to do before. Okay, you're not allowed to get married. Okay, you're not allowed to be intimate with your spouse. You're not allowed to pluck hairs of your body. You're not allowed to put perfume on, etc. And these are things that inshallah we'll learn about a lot more when going to a more detailed text about exactly what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. But ihram is very important, and in being in Mecca itself is you're already in a state of ihram in Mecca, even if you're not wearing ihram. Why? Because Mecca is a sacred place. And Mecca is the place that a lot of the ulama, they say it's the only place in the world where you are now not only accountable for what you're accountable for everywhere in the world, which is your actions, but now you're also accountable for your thoughts. That in Mecca you're accountable for even bad thoughts. That's why you must always, even Mecca, you must have good thoughts, because bad thoughts they equal to actions in Mecca. That's what a lot of the ulama have taught us. This is very important for us to take note of. طيب. ولا يصح الإحرام بالحج إلا في أشهره. As you mentioned that you cannot put ihram for Hajj except in its month. As for the ihram for Umrah, it is throughout the year. The months of Hajj are Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, Ashr, Dhul Hijjah, the first 10 days of the Hijjah. And the last of the months of Hajj, in other words, the last time you're allowed to put ihram on is the morning of Fajr Laylat al-Nahr. In other words, once that time has come, you're not allowed to do Arafah anymore. Because the last of Arafah is the end of Arafah is the Fajr of the morning of Eid, the 10th of Al-Hijjah, but also called Layla Yawm al-Nahr. There's a lot of the slaughtering and sacrifices occur on that day. وباقي الأركان الوقوف بعرفة. This is arkan. This is number one. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, Al-Hajj Arafah. That Hajj is Arafah. Why? Because it is the only aspect of the Hajj which is limited to a time. It's the only aspect of the Hajj which is actually limited to a time and a place. And it starts, of course, from upon the predominant position from the Dhuhr, Dhuhr of the day of Arafah on the 9th day, up until Fajr of the next day. And some people have allowed from the Fajr of the 9th day up until the Fajr of the next day. And in that there's ease for people. Because it's a big place, but it's not, it's not such a big place. So people need to leave. And even if you stay in Arafah for a moment, for like less than a minute, and you make dua, that is enough for Arafah. Okay, that's the bare minimum. But you have to stand. You have to be attached to the ground. You can't be a rich prince and come on a helicopter and fly around Arafah and say you did Arafah. You must be attached to the ground of Arafah. So it says al-wuquf, standing on Arafah. And I said this is the only one attached to time. Why? Because the other arkan, if you don't do it, during the time of Hajj, it's always going to be on your neck, and you always have to do it. As for Arafah, if you miss it, your entire Hajj is missed. You cannot do the other actions and then do Arafah the next year. No. So what does the person do? He comes into Mecca, and the first thing he does the tawaf. Okay, the tawaf where he comes in is tawaf of greeting the haram. That's the first tawaf that you do. This is not a rukn. It's not the rukn. But in that greeting, the tawaf of the Kaaba, you're now allowed to do sa'i, because sa'i is after tawaf. You don't do sa'i without just on its own. You do it after tawaf. This sa'i that you do in the days of Hajj, you can choose, is the sa'i from the arkan of Hajj, or is it a sa'i for an umrah that I'm doing? Understand? So in other words, you have a choice. Do I want to do the sa'i in the beginning before Arafah? Or am I going to do the sa'i, which is a rukn of the Hajj, after Arafah, when I do tawaf al-ifada, which is the tawaf I do after Arafah? You understand? Then you're allowed to do sa'i after that tawaf or not. Because if you did it already in the beginning before Arafah, then you've already finished it. If you haven't, then you must do it after the tawaf al-ifada. In other words, there's no sequence of the sa'i has to be after the tawaf al-ifada. The tawaf al-ifada is the tawaf you do after. And then, of course, the halq or taqsir, the cutting of the hair or shortening of the hair. And this is, of course, something that must be done as well. Some of the early books says it's wajib, such as in Matan Abi Shuja, you see that this is considered a wajib, not a rukn. But that's not the mu'tamad. It's not the predominant position. This is in fact a rukn. You must cut. Okay. So therefore, these are the 5 arkan of the Hajj. And as for the Umrah, they're the same, except for the al-wuquf bi Arafah. So in other words, it's the ihram, the tawaf, the sa'i, and halq aw taqsir, cutting the hair, either all of it or some of it. And a tawaf, as we know, is exactly the same as salah, except that the Prophet said Allah has permitted speaking therein. And so if you speak during your tawafs, let the person speak with good words. وَيَجِبُ لِلطَّوَافِ, it is obligatory for tawaf to cover the awrah, just as in salah. Tahara, to be purified from both the minor and major impurities, and for there not to be any dirt or filth on you. وَأَنْ يَكُونَ سَبْعَ طَوْفَاتٍ, and that when you make the tawaf, it is 7 what's it called? Circumambulations, whatever it's called. Going around the Kaaba 7 times. And of course, the Kaaba is going to be on your right or your left side. Your left side. Your heart is facing towards the side of your heart, and you start from Rukn al-Yamani. Okay. So each corner of the Kaaba, there is going to be, it's called different rukns, right? There's the rukn that has the Hajar al-Aswad, black stone. Then the one before it, it's called a rukn al-Yamani, which is where you start the tawaf from. So even if you are after that and you start going around, that is not your first tawaf until you started from the corner that's before the corner of the black stone. That's when you start the actual tawaf. And what is, okay, so that's it. وَهُوَ خَارِجٌ عَنْهُ. Notice what he says here. The house, the Kaaba, called Al-Bayt, Baytullah, is on the left side, and you are outside of the house. You cannot do tawaf of the Kaaba and you're inside of the Kaaba. But why does he say this? Why? Because he says this because the Kaaba that we see today, its width is smaller necessarily than the original Kaaba. I'm not talking about the Hajj al-Ismail, the semicircle that's around it. Also, you can't go through that semicircle. You have to go around it, part of the tawaf. But the bottom of the Kaaba, the white marble that you see under at the bottom of the Kaaba, that is part of the Kaaba as well. Okay, and so when one goes to the Kaaba, if you are holding on to the Kaaba and you're walking perhaps, no, now your tawaf is invalidated for that particular moment that you're in, touching the Kaaba. So you're not allowed to touch the Kaaba and walk during the tawaf. Yes, you can touch the Kaaba, you have the opportunity to kiss the black stone, but it's so difficult to do so that you most likely will be pushed. So if that does occur, you must take a few steps back and then continue with the tawaf. Because now you're actually inside of the Kaaba. Inside of the space of the Kaaba is within. Okay. All right. ويجب أن يكون السعي 7 وبعد الطواف. Okay, so as I mentioned, the sa'i is after the tawaf and it's 7. وأن يبدأ بالصفا ويختم بالمروة. You start at Safa and you end at Marwa. What does that mean? That you start at Safa, you go to Marwa, that's 1. From Marwa to Safa is 2. Again to Marwa, 3. Again to Safa, 4. Again to Marwa, 5. Again to Safa, 6. 7th is to Marwa. So it's each time you go, and it's about 500 meters. It's not very long. That is, of course, the distance. But you don't, when you go from Safa to Marwa back to Safa, that's not 1, that's considered 2. Okay? Yeah. So in total, it's about 3.5 kilometers. تقريبا. Approximately. Okay, so that's the arkan of the Hajj. Then we have the wajibat of the Hajj. These are things, as I mentioned, which if you don't do it, you have to pay a dam. Okay. Now, he says the first one is ihram min al-miqat. What does that mean? That these are the spaces that you have to do the ihram at or before it. If you don't do it, what should you do? You should go back to do it. You understand? If you don't do it, you should go back to do it. Okay? But if you cannot go back to do it, and you then put on ihram where you are in Mecca, right? Then you still have to pay a dam. You have to pay an amount to buy a sheep, and each the dam, how much you pay depends on the particular action that you've done. So that's why in later books, inshallah, we'll deal with that. But so that's the first thing. وَالْبَبِيتْ بِمُزْدَلِفَ لَيْلَةَ النَّحْرِ. So after Arafah, going to Muzdalifah and spending even a few moments in Muzdalifah. It's not, you don't have to spend the whole night. Just a few moments in Muzdalifah at night. That is it's sufficient for the wajib. Okay. As for the 3 nights of Tashriq, what are the 3 nights of Tashriq? They are the nights of the days of Tashriq. And what are the days of Tashriq? They are the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th of the Hijjah. Isn't it so? It's the 3 days after the Eid, after Eid al-Adha, after what's called Yawm al-Nahr. In these days, you are going to be doing the rest of the parts of the Hajj, such as Ar-Ramy, which is to throw the jamarat, these stones, pebbles at these structures, which represented, and of course, as you know, each part of the Hajj represents symbolisms that have been made prescribed as worship for us based on the actions of many of the early people, such as Sayyidina Ibrahim, Abraham, and his uh, his wife Hagar, etc. Hajar, etc. Right. So sleeping in Mina for the 3 nights of Tashriq. This is different to the sleeping or mabit at Muzdalifah. Muzdalifah is even for a moment. But Tashriq, for the mabit in Mina has to be at least half of the night. Each night you must spend at least half of the night in Mina. You understand? So if you do not do this, then you are going to have to pay them. But in the Hanafi madhab, it's sunnah. It's not obligatory as in here. So you don't have to pay them according to the Hanafis. So for someone who is not able to do so and they're unwell and they can't stay at Mina, then they don't have to pay the dam. But it's better for them to do so if they're able to do so. وَالرَّمْيُ of course, throwing the jamarat, وَطَوَافُ الْوِدَاعِ. And طَوَافُ الْوِدَاعِ is from the wajibat of Hajj, but it's also something that it's a sunnah to do generally whenever you leave Mecca. The Tawaf al-Wida' for the Hujjaj, specifically, it's the last thing that they do before leaving Mecca. So they do the Tawaf and then they leave. Now, you're not supposed to do anything after it. So your bag should be packed, everything's ready at the hotel. Then you go for Tawaf al-Wida', you go back to collect your bags and you leave. Okay. If you catch the Salah time, you can pray the Salah, no problem. But no, now you can't okay, let's go for a meal, let's go spend another 5-10 hours in Mecca and then we can go. No. It's within that last, sure you're going to spend like 5 hours, no, that's not a problem. But like if it's extended long periods just for being in Mecca, for the sake of being in Mecca and you could have left, then that is also kind of limiting the action. Because Tawaf al-Wida' is the final thing they should do. And that's the same thing for anyone who leaves Mecca. To make the final Tawaf is also called Tawaf al-Wida'. طيب. As for the Sunan, فَكُلُّ مَا سِوَى الْأَرْكَانِ وَالْوَاجِبَاتِ, it's everything besides these 2 other categories you mentioned. Whoever leaves a rukn, your Hajj is not valid. And you are not allowed to exit from the ihram until you do the arkan. But this is وَلَا يَجْبُرُهُ دَمٌ وَلَا غَيْرُ. When it says a dam, to pay a penalty fine does not suffice. But this is extremely difficult. Imagine you go for Hajj and you're not allowed to do Arafah, and now you have to wait till the next year because you're not allowed to get out of your ihram, the state of ihram. No, that's extremely difficult. So what do the ulama, they say, what happens is that it becomes an umrah. You change your niyyah to an umrah, which becomes an umrah, and you now do the things that you do for umrah, and then you cut your hair and you're out of the ihram. But what does that mean? You still have to come for the Hajj. Your Hajj is still obligatory upon you that you intended to come for. Look what happened in the time of the Prophet ﷺ when they were going for Umrah and they were prevented from entering, right? Everyone was prevented, and he was in the tent, and one of his wives said to him that he instructed them, okay, we are going to get out of the state of ihram by cutting our hair. And then one of his wives told him that they will follow your actions, Ya Rasulullah. So the Prophet went out and he was the first one to cut his hair. Everyone followed suit. So in other words, even for Umrah, you're not allowed to get okay, I can't do Umrah now for some reason, let me just get out of ihram, khalas. No, you still have to do an action which is from the actions which allow you to come out of ihram. Okay, and the major one is the cutting of the hair. وثلاثة من الأركان لا تفوته ما دام حيا. And so this is the important point I mentioned. Of course, you go into Ihram, that's normal, that's to start the Hajj. And the Arafah is time limited, and you have to do that. But if you do not do the tawaf after the Arafah, or you do not do the sa'i after the Arafah, or you do not cut your hair after the Arafah, you still have to do that even towards throughout your life. It's still a rukn of the Hajj. So it's not limited to the days of Hajj, but you still have to do it. But obviously it's difficult for you to be in the state of Ihram all that time, because you're never going to come out of the state of Ihram until you finish with your halq, until you remove your hair or part of your hair. So they just say from the perspective of the permissibility, and a lot of the people who live in Mecca, because of a lot of people that's there in Mecca, they delay these things till after everyone's left by a few days. And then they go do that, so it's much easier for them to finish the Hajj. وَمَنْ تَرَكَ شَيْئًا مِنَ الْوَاجِبَاتِ, and whoever leaves something from the wajibat, remember wajib is not the same now as fard in this particular chapter. Your Hajj is valid. Your Hajj is not, you don't get less reward in the sense of, because you couldn't do it, for example, you're not going to get less reward for your Hajj. It's just that if there was a problem and you couldn't do it for a reason, then now you just have to pay a penalty. That's easy. It's like that. But if you do so intentionally, you're leaving out the wajibat, then you have to pay a dam, and you are sinful for that as well. وَعَلَيْهِ إِثْمٌ إِن لَمْ يُعْذَرْ, if he does not have any evidence. And if you leave something out of the sunnah, there's nothing upon you, but of course you've now left out a great virtue. Right? Okay, so this is muharramatul ihram. What is forbidden for you to do while you're in the state of ihram? Covering your head as a man. Men are not allowed to cover their head. But let me say this. There is two loosenings. So when you're in Hajj, after you've done Arafah and Tawaf, the first Tawaf, and some of the actions related to that, you're allowed to now, you are now allowed to do certain things which you were not allowed to do before. But you're still in the state of Ihram. So it's kind of considering a loosening from the Ihram, but you're not fully yet. It's only after you cut your hair that you're fully loosened from the Ihram and you're allowed to take the clothes. So one of the things that you're allowed to do towards the end, for example, if you put a covering over your head, to prevent yourself from the sun, for example, the heat of the sun, that would be allowed. This is different from standing in shade, obviously. But generally, covering the head for a man in the Hajj, haram to do so. Meaning, you have to pay a penalty. So it's not only if you leave a wajib, you have to pay a penalty. If you do any of the things which is haram while you are in the state of ihram, you also have to pay a penalty. Okay. I've seen online some people getting married and they're in the state of ihram. No, that's haram. You're not allowed to do so. Why are you doing your nikah in the haram of Mecca? It's haram to do so. Covering the face of a woman, the woman covering her face while she's in the state of ihram, or part of her face, is also obviously for a man as well, but specifically mentioning women here because a lot of women, they do wear niqab and they cover their face, but in what do you call it, in the Hajj, when you set your ihram, you're not allowed to do so. Your face must be uncovered. Okay, and that's not. Don't be deluded by people who say it's for security reasons. No, it's not the only. It's ta'abbudi. What is the reason why all of these things are here? What's the wisdom? Wisdom is something else. What's the reason? What is the legal reason? Is to worship Allah. Allah prescribed all of these things for us to do out of His worship only. Yeah? And you're not allowed to cut your nails or pluck hair or cut hair while you're in the state of ihram. And you're not allowed to put oil in your hair or in your beard. All of these things you can do just before you get into the state of ihram. That's why you take a ghusl, you get yourself ready, then you get into the state of ihram. You perfumed everything before that. Once you're in the state of ihram, you're not allowed to do it. And that's why it's very important for a man to be fully shaven, and for women, obviously, everyone must be fully shaven, besides the beard, before you go into a state of ihram. So that also, like, if you after you shave, you could itch, right? That's normal if you don't put on like certain things that prevent that. So that itching can cause you to also remove hair, so that you should be careful about as well. And that is very dangerous because you'll have to pay a dam. And also, to get married. What is also haram is intimacy, as we mentioned, ومقدماته, and foreplay, any form of foreplay. So in sexual intercourse, everything is halal except for what they call it, intercourse from the, what is the word? You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, I don't have to explain. But within the Shafi'iyya, some other forms of foreplay, things are not generally not allowed. Like, some of the other actions people do, except if it's considered foreplay. Okay, so that's why they say if you're doing, let's say, having intimacy from muqaddimat, if all of that is done before the actual act, then it's allowed. But if you do the act first and then you do what's considered foreplay customarily, then that's not allowed. So that's generally, that's the only way that they give qualification of that. But other scholars have said neither that nor this is all allowed except for the one action which we know. This is within the Shafi madhab. I'm representing our school to you. For multiple reasons, that's the case. Nonetheless, all of that is not allowed in the ihram. Obviously, like what we mentioned about fasting, if you happen to wake up and you're in that state, then you're not outside of a state of ihram. You're still in ihram, and you simply have to do ghusl. But again, without wiping too hard on the body so that hair is removed, etc. while you do ghusl. وإتلاف كل حيوان بري وحشي مأكول. And you're not allowed to kill any animal in the haram, whether that's a land animal that's wild, anything like, you're not allowed to kill it that you eat, as opposed to a domesticated animal. And that's why they bring the slaughter with them. So they domesticate these animals in order for them to be slaughtered as the dam, as the penalty. وَالْمَرْأَةُ كَالرَّجُلِ, and a woman is like a man in all of these things. So that's the section, alhamdulillah, we finished now with the section of ibadat of worship in this particular book, Risalat al-Jami'ah. And next week, inshallah, hopefully we can have the class the same time as Sunday, inshallah. We'll finish, inshallah, this book and most of, if not all of, the seerah, inshallah. And either next week or the following week. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam bis-sawab. Right. طيب. الله يبارك فيكم. جزاكم الله خير. All right. Assalamu alaikum. If there's no questions, I'll be off, inshallah. We started a bit late, so that's why we ended also like 5 minutes late as well. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry, that wasn't my end. But no,
No,
all
no,
good
it's
with it.
fine. It's fine. All right. Fair. All
Assalamu
right then.
alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum.